Hi, everybody. My name is Chad Hallert. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Foundry, an integrated marketing and advertising agency here in Reno. Thank you so much for attending today and giving up your lunch. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff. We're going to talk about how you can elevate your marketing, especially right now in 2020 and beyond, through integrated marketing. And it's a presentation, but I want it to be a conversation as well. So feel free to ask any questions or make any comments during the presentation. I would say I'd look at the chat, but I'm probably lying. I'm not going to see it. So feel free to unmute yourself and we'll just start going. All right. So as I mentioned, marketing has a job, right? Our role as a marketer is really to drive business growth, economic growth, and fuel the industries that keep us all employed, right? So it's been a really hard year for that. We're going to talk about it in more detail, but the marketing we're doing now has to work. We don't have the luxury of doing a whole lot of things, some of them not working and some of them working. We've got to get it right, and we can't afford to miss the target too often in 2020. And so we're going to talk about how integrated marketing is really the key to make that happen. So real quick, introducing myself, as I mentioned, Chad Hallert, Chief Digital Officer at Foundry. I've been doing this a long time. I was fortunate enough to be the young guy in management in 2000 at the Eldorado Resorts when they needed a digital marketing person. And so I volunteered at the ripe age of 24, ran digital marketing for Eldorado Resorts for 13 years, and then was fortunate enough to work at Noble Studios with Jared, who you saw on that last screen, for another 7, and then now partnering with Jim Bowserman and the team at Foundry. So a lot of work on the client side, on the agency side, working with different types of businesses. So it's been great. It reminds me that I'm not as young as I used to be, but it definitely has been great to get a lot of different perspectives on what works in different industries and across different industries. So today we have some agenda items to cover. We want to cover how 2020 has permanently reshaped marketing. And so let me see if I can make the screen a little better. And so, there's a lot of blogs being written, articles being written on how things have changed, how they haven't changed, how everything will bounce back to normal. We're going to talk about that a little more and talk about why things have changed and what's been accelerated by the stuff we're dealing with right now this year in this day and age. We're going to talk about marketing silos and why they're bad for business and why we all need to bulldoze those things down. We're going to talk about changing the game through integrated marketing, how integrated marketing is the key to break silos and produce great marketing results. We're going to show you how to build an integrated marketing strategy, and then we're going to give you a nice checklist for success so you can take this stuff and roll forward for your business and for your company. So how many of you feel like this year? This is a pretty, it's been a pretty crazy year, right? I mean, you've got, number one, you've got, COVID we're all working through. You've got the quarantine, you've got unemployment. There's been some social unrest, right? In different parts of the country. There's been unemployment, some racial situations to deal with. It's been really tough, right? And you've seen probably marketers make mistakes and get blown up on social media. I'm going to do this so I can see you guys while I talk. On social media, on other marketing channels where they've got it wrong. So yeah, this year. It's really hard to be a marketer. I mean, it's been very difficult. It's been trying at times. It's been stressful, and I mean, there's lots of examples that we've seen locally and nationally where people have missed their goal, missed the marketing message, and it's really blown up and cost them a lot of brand value. And so what are we going to do? How do we get through this? And so as we think about that, there's one approach we could do, which actually was my approach, I'd say March through maybe May. And that was just hibernate, go back, let's not do anything. Let's just wait until this kind of blows over. Let's wait until 2021, and we won't do any marketing. We'll just service our existing customers and make them happy and wait it out. And that worked for a little bit, but the problem is we still have customers that need our product or service. And if we're not doing our job as marketers, we're neglecting them, right? We're not doing what we need to do to help service them and provide value to them. So this approach, although it was good maybe for a few weeks, maybe a month, isn't the ideal. So there's this option. And there's some good examples locally, especially of people doing this. The next option is, okay, well, we're not really going to do any promotional messaging. What we'll do instead is we'll go to crisis communications. So we're going to post on Facebook and Instagram and all the channels every week, updated hours, updated safety precautions we're taking. Every now and then we'll post an image or a pic or a video to make people feel good. We'll do some community outreach. And that's good. I mean, that's really good communication. And it's been, when you do come across those messages, it makes you feel good. But at the end of the day, is that really marketing? Is that enough? Is it enough to simply provide information, operational information, and to try to make somebody chuckle, or make them feel good every now and then when they see a post? And so, what do you do when you have that question? You ask yourself, let's ask Google, right? So let's Google what marketing is. And so, Google marketing, first result is dictionary.com. There's about 2 billion, I think, pages listed under that. But, marketing is defined as the action or business of promoting and selling products or services, including marketing research and advertising. And so when I think about the last two strategies we picked, right? Crisis communication, and feel good connection kind of content, and also doing nothing. Neither of those are marketing, right? Neither of those are us doing our job as marketers. They're a component of marketing. Public relations and social communications is a component of marketing, but it's not marketing, right? We've got to do our jobs. And if we're not benefiting businesses, customers that need us, and also the economic engine that fuels everything. And so we've got to do our job. We've got to do work. And although I looked at about 20 definitions of marketing before I picked dictionary.com's, it was the first. But despite the different definitions, there's really a consistent process we follow. No matter what business we're in, what industry we're in, what we do, it's really straightforward. It's that we've got to understand our audience. We've got to figure out how we're going to reach them. We've got to gain their attention, right? The average person sees 5,000 messages, media messages a day. We've got to gain their attention. We've got to inspire action. We've got to get them to do something, whether it's book something, buy something, research something, tell somebody about something. There's some kind of action we've got to inspire. And then we've got to retain loyalty and retain customers and build loyalty with those existing customers, right? So we've got a job to do. And again, it took me a while to get to this, right? March hit, working from home, felt really weird to try to promote anything, during the initial quarantine months. And then we had, protest, we had some unrest, and then it still felt weird. And it took a while to understand that marketing, if done right, actually provides a valuable service to potential customers. It's not us trying to, sell snake oil. It's us trying to find people who need what we have to offer and provide that to them. And so, thinking of how this all works, right? You've got kind of the risk-reward trade-off. Where we do nothing, there's no risk. It's very low. Well, there is some risk, but there's very low risk, almost no reward. We could try to be as aggressive as ever. And, the analogy there would be become the world's best lion tamer. Tons of risk, maybe a lot of reward if we get it right. Or we do our jobs and act as true marketers and have a marketing, campaign and strategy out there that includes public relations and social. And what we're doing there is we're playing blackjack. We could win, we could lose. There's some reward, there's some risk, but we're at least doing our job and playing the game. And that's what I'd propose that we need to do moving forward. But that said, we've got to do it a little differently. And so there's definitely been a change in willingness of people to listen to promotional messaging, right? Of people to listen to sales pitches or discount rates all the time, discount price all the time. We've got to do it a little differently. So what we've got to do now is we can no longer just talk about how great we are, right? There's some cynicism there. There's a lot of noise. We've got to prove it. And the only way to prove it is by providing not only a great product, but a great customer experience. And the CMO of Microsoft had a really good quote about this that I put here. I'll read it to you real quick. Companies today need to put the customer at the center of not just storytelling, but also the products and services that organization builds and each of the touch points with the customer. They need to know who their customers are, how they move through their experience, what the emotional dynamics are, and what information is required to help them be successful. That's the true job of marketing in 2020 and beyond. Is this, let me ask the group this, I don't know how hard it'll be to unmute, but is this the kind of stuff as marketers and business people that you're traditionally thinking of? Is this a little different than the normal conversation that takes place? Put you on the spot. Maybe Karen Rowe, since I saw your name. She might be muted. All right, Karen, I won't put you on the spot. But this is a different conversation for me, right? For me personally, as a marketer, the normal conversation is how do we make what we're selling sizzle, and then how do we build a great mousetrap, to find our customers, catch them, and bring them in, right? So it's a little different, right? What's the experience they go through? What are the touch points? How are they feeling during those experiences? And then what information allows you to add value to them? So it's kind of a change in the way we think. In the industry, the buzzword right now is customer experience, right? Or CX is the acronym to it. And there's only one way to get there, right? And that is through integrated marketing. And the problem with integrated marketing is it's a lot harder than it sounds. It sounds easy, right? We'll be integrated, we'll work together, but that's not enough. And so it's more than a buzzword, right? Integrated marketing is an approach to creating a unified and seamless experience for customers to interact with a brand or an enterprise. It attempts to meld all aspects of marketing communication, such as advertising, sales promotion, PR, direct marketing, social, through their respective mixes of tactics, channels, media, activities, so that all work together as a unified force. It is a process designed to ensure that all messaging and communication strategies are consistent across all channels and centered on the customer. And that's from the Direct Marketing Association. But here's the deal, right? And I mentioned this in a Reno Gazette Journal article. Doing integrated marketing is a lot like following a healthy diet, right? We all say we eat healthy, but then we actually write down what we eat or we note it in one of those apps, right? And we startle ourselves. So yeah, we got a Diet Coke, but we ate a 50-pound hamburger with extra onions and all of that. So we're not really doing it, and I'm as guilty as anybody, right? In my history of thinking, hey, we're being really integrated. In the reality, we're being somewhat integrated, and there's a lot of upside and opportunity being left on the table. And here's why. Marketing silos. Marketing silos are the enemy of integrated marketing. So what is a marketing silo? I won't read this verbatim, but essentially, a silo is a great way to decentralize. And so as a business grows, it's impossible to have one person manage everything, especially in a situation where there's varying functional goals, there's varying technical requirements. And so what happens is you create departments, right? You create departments, department managers, you organize things in a way that that makes sense from almost an assembly line point of view. Here's one area, it's going to focus on this. It's HR. You've got an HR director, they'll do their thing. We've got product over here. And although it's efficient from a functional standpoint, it's the absolute enemy of any kind of consistent customer experience and marketing message. And so, using the old farm analogy here, it's useful for grains too, right? You can have one grain in one silo, one grain in the other. For us, we really have two types of silos we see when we work with clients all the time, right? One is a department silo. What I mentioned, there's sales, there's service, there's product, there's marketing, there's more. Another is inside of marketing, as things grow, it can segment as well. You've got traditional media, you've got digital media, you've got social media, maybe direct mail or PR. And so what happens is, a lot of things happen, but what happens is a lot of times at the department level, there's different goals. And so an example would be, you may have a brand goal of positioning your business as a premium offering in your space. You may not be the cheapest, right? You may be a little bit more expensive, but you're high value, high service, premium. And then what happens is when sales gets down to their quota the last week of the month and they're short, they fire sale to hit their numbers. And so those actual goals conflict with each other, right? How can you be premium if you're selling at a discount? And then at the service level, what happens is you're totally looking at different performance data, right? So traditional media are looking about how many eyeballs they captured with TV, right? For example, or radio, how many households they touched in a region. Digital media is looking at return on ad spend, lead acquisition. Social media is looking at engagement. And so, when you've got all these different conversations happening about different metrics, if you're a business, how do you know where to spend your money? How do you know what's working and what's not? You're not even comparing apples to apples, right? So it's very, very difficult in these types of silos to, number one, know if things are working, but number two, how do you unify that customer experience when you're not even operating in a unified fashion? And I know there's a lot of small businesses here, so wanted to comment that small businesses are not immune. And so, we have this small business maturity model, and you guys please tell me if you can relate to this, but it starts out, there's no marketing, right? You start out, you have a great product or service, you're like, hey, people are just going to come because this is rad. What I'm doing is awesome. And then, one day you wake up and you're like, okay, I already sold this to my family and friends. I don't really have anybody else that knows about it. So the owner starts doing marketing, sales, marketing, promotion. They realize they can't do it all, or maybe they're not experts there. They hire a marketing director. Then things start moving. Your business grows, you bring in some more revenue, but that person gets swamped or finds stuff that they can't do, right? Areas of expertise. So then they're going to hire, a couple different agencies, maybe a team, hire a social media, person right out of college. Before you know it, they're silos. And so even the smallest businesses, 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, as they grow, get to this point where there's silos. And our customers hate it, which is really the irony of how popular and common this is. So Deloitte did a survey, and it said 75% of consumers expect a consistent interaction across all departments within a company they deal with. However, when they're asked if that happens, 58% say they feel like they're communicating with completely separate companies. So not only different departments, but separate companies as they move between customer service, product sales, marketing, in a variety of departments. So,
hey, Chad?
Yes.
Can I ask a question, or are we doing Q&A at the end?
No, ask a question, please.
I'm wondering, is there an example of an inconsistency in terms of the customer experience? Is it sort of like you told one person your account number and all that, and then you go to someone else and then you got to do that again? Or do you have yet another example that we can all relate to maybe?
Yeah. No, I think, I think what you mentioned is an example, right? It's a lack of information flowing. So you've got to start that process over and over again. It can also be as overarching as the brand messaging, the brand communication, the customer service messaging. So part of it is, let's say from a marketing standpoint, we have a lead acquisition program, right? So we write content every month about how great our service is for companies to sign up for. We come across very helpful and very easy to work with. You go to the site, fill out a form. It's very simple, great. The salesperson calls you. They're extremely easy to work with. And then you get in and become a client, and it's a whole different story. There's not that same level of service. The interactions become very mundane or very granular. It's a change. And so what happens is that, a lot of times these companies, the departments, at the department level silo, they're just run differently. And so they hire a different type of talent. They interact with customers different. And so what happens if you don't view things more holistically, you might succeed in one area, like you're doing a great job in sales, but you're not doing a great job in onboarding, right? Or marketing, or your product's not living up to what you're selling. Like we used to make a joke in the casino hotel convention space. I don't know if anybody here is from the casino side, but we used to say, we sell the dream, and then convention services lives the nightmare. And the reason is we would sell whatever you want. Dave knows. Dave does these events. So, Dave, you want a steak dinner for $15? You got it. You want this, and then you show up and it's like, well, it's not real steak. It's whatever it might be. That's just one example, but it's pervasive, right? It can be as robust as a totally different experience for that person. But the important part is to put yourself in the eyes of that consumer and go, okay, what is it like from the first day that I realize I need help in an area? And it may not even be that they know your product, right? Like for me, for example, my wife and I have cracked tiles on our floor right now. So we're going like, okay, we need to fix that. So we're like, okay, is that like going to Home Depot? Is that calling a general contractor? Like, we don't even know the solution yet, but we know the problem. So when it goes from that first step of like, there's a problem I want to solve for, to I just wrapped this, how was that experience? There's certain touch points along the way. You want to feel like the same company and do a great job. And so I mean, not a super specific answer, but gives you an idea for it. And it varies by company. What happens though, if you have these silos that are really common, is you get a bunch of side effects, right? So one side effect is you have incomplete data for decision making. So again, you've got sales telling you, you know, they hit their goal, but they're not telling you that they fire sold the brand. You know, you've got marketing saying they're acquiring leads, but you just don't have a clear vision of if you're succeeding. You also have duplication of effort and inefficiency. So a lot of times we'll find with clients that different departments are doing very similar reports, or it's just, there's redundancy that doesn't need to take place there. You have finger pointing and a lack of ownership. The most concrete example I'll give of that is, you know, sales saying marketing is driving poor quality leads, right? Like the marketing team were like, hey, we've driven, you know, 100% leads, and sales is going, yeah, but none of them are ready to buy. You know, so those conversations. Incentivize the wrong behavior. So, you know, one department, you know, example would be, I've seen call centers with a goal around call time. Like, let's reduce the call time as much as possible. Well, okay, but are you giving a good customer experience? So that goal becomes contrary to the idea of making it a great experience. People are rushing off the call. And then a disjointed customer experience, like mentioned in those quotes, you know, how does it feel to the customer? Because whether or not on paper, you know, you think you've got it right, if it feels to them like you're a different company or a different organization, or it doesn't feel good with one area, you know, it's not going to be something you tell your friends about, right? So a lot of side effects of marketing silos. We need to get rid of them. How do we do that? We have to change the game. And so the analogy here would be, you know, you can make a incremental change and try to get more meetings, but that's not going to work. What we're saying here is you've got to completely change the game. You know, if you're playing football today, start playing basketball, right? Go Nuggets. I don't know, but you can't just make a simple change. You've got to make a pretty serious change. So it needs to start with the right mindset. And so this is maybe a quick raise of hands. How many of you guys have like referenced this idea of like a marketing funnel or sales funnel or the funnel concept, right? It's like you know, MBA, you know, it's your marketing thing. And I still use it. It's a habit I have to get over with, but the marketing funnel is wrong. I mean, it's wrong in so many ways. Number one, just the vision of a marketing funnel, you dump a bunch of people up top into this like machine, right? And it goes through this process, and then out at the bottom, it like spits out customers, right? Like customers are the end product here. And it also is very, you know, whether it's department or sometimes they'll do it like awareness, consideration, purchase, whatever the method of the funnel is, it assumes just an even transfer. And once that transfer happens, they don't think about anything again. And it's just an outdated model. And it's useful sometimes to measure efficiency, but it's not a great model to conceptualize around. And so HubSpot came up with a pretty cool model. It's not perfect, but it's pretty cool, called the flywheel, which is a much better way to think about how things work. And the idea with a flywheel is an engineering part, and you can Google it to learn more about what they do. But the idea is, you know, your customers become the center of everything you do, right? That's the center of the mission of each and every decision you make. And then marketing is a piece, sales is a piece, service is a piece, product is a piece. It can go on and on and on. And every single department's goal is to put value back to that center, to make the customer experience that much better. And the cool thing about the flywheel analogy is that as a flywheel gets bigger and heavier with growth of the company, it moves faster. It gains momentum. And that's part of what I like about this analogy a lot as well. But these departments, if one of them doesn't work, it's like having a stool with a missing leg, right? It's not going to move. And so this is a new, you know, again, you can read more about it. It's a cool concept, but it's a different way of thinking where customers aren't a byproduct of all the work you do, right? It's not the output. It's the center, you know, of everything you think, do. And most companies don't do this, you know, and again, myself guilty. It's a new way of thinking, right? It's not thinking that our job is only to get them to here, and then that's the customer service job, you know, to keep them, or the account job, or whatever type of business it might be. Any questions on that or comments on that, guys? All right. And this idea of customers in the center can go as far as you want to take it, right? It can go simply to like, hey, let's start sharing data more. It can go to the point where it's like, hey, let's all understand this model. Or it can go to the point of, let's actually create teams that are multifunctional, right? All around a product, service, client, whatever you might want to be. So this has been a popular model we've seen where yeah, you've got your functional team, so you can build functional expertise, marketing, product, IT, but you've now said, hey, this is a client team. All these skills together are going to have the single focus of making client A, B, and C happy. Or it's a product team. We're rolling out this new product. Each of these departments are going to be represented here. And so they've got, we call them client teams, you call them pods. That's kind of a popular name people use nowadays. But the point is, you've got these functional areas, but you've created this centralization around this concept of, we're going to make this experience for the customer perfect, right? Or as close to perfect as we can through all of our departments from start to finish. And by doing that, a couple things happen. Number one, the customers start having a great experience and they tell their friends about it, right? So all that hard work you're doing, creating a great product, getting the word out, spending money advertising, doing PR, you're now getting the full value because somebody's going to refer you, right? They're more likely to refer you. You're gonna get that exposure because they're gonna say, man, everything was great. I met Dave Archer, super nice guy. He signed me up for NCET. I went to this lunch. The food was good. The networking was good. I was walking out, somebody gave me $100 to play on a slot machine. I don't know, whatever that might be. But there's no hole. It's not like, hey, it started good, but the food was okay. The speaker sucked, but I networked well. It's not a mixed bag, right? So you can do that. The other thing you could do here is you can start setting goals for each department to contribute to that customer experience. So you take somebody like, a customer service rep, which is probably the most stressed, not even grinding, I'll say the most grinding job in the world, right? You're answering 50 calls a day, half of them are complaints, half are confusion. You're trying to explain, to a 90-year-old person how to use technology, right? Whatever it might be. It's not a very thankful job. Like it can be a grind. So this lets you realize, hey, I understand how my job contributes to this customer experience on the daily. It creates some clarity around that, which is really good for some of those jobs that don't get all the accolades. And it also changes the way we develop marketing plans. So, for those of us that have to develop a marketing plan every year, here's the traditional way it goes, right? It's September and your boss goes, hey, I need a marketing plan by October 15th with the budget you need. And you go, oh shit, okay, I'm on it. And you pull the team together and you do this, you do your due diligence. So it's situation analysis, marketing objectives, marketing strategy, marketing tactics, recommended budget. That goes to the head of marketing or the CEO. They ask you a few questions and then they stamp it. And then you send it to the other department heads and you say, hey guys, marketing for 2021, read it. And some of them skim it. Some of them don't read anything. A couple of them read the whole thing and that's it, right? They interpret it. How many of you do your marketing plan that way? Raise your hands just for that. I've done them that way a lot, right? And just getting this done by the date is like an amazing conquest, just like, okay, we hit 10:15, thank God, check. But if you start thinking about customer experience, the whole thing changes and it becomes so much better. So you still do all that work. You still, if you're in marketing, you still got to do your SWOT analysis, your competitive analysis. If you're in customer service, you got to look at your satisfaction rate, your call abandon rate, sales rate, your close rate, your renewal rate, all that stuff. You still do all that, but then you come to a meeting together, or start having conversations about the customer experience. And all this work you did isn't finalized. It's input into this other thing you do, which is you create a clear customer experience vision. What do we want the customer experience to be like? So if I'm a customer and I wake up in the morning and decide I'm a potential customer and I want to do something, what's the vision of how that looks from tip to tail and all the major steps in between? Then you want to understand who your customers are and what their buyer's journey is. And so the reality is you have different segments of customers, right? You have NCT, I'll just use NCT as an example. You've got people that are small business owners that are trying to network. You have some that maybe work at organizations and are looking for education. You have a lot of variety there. So what are your major customer segments? And then each of those has a different buyer's journey. And I know that buyer's journey word is used a lot lately. It's a buzzword, but it's super important because a lot of data has shown 60-70% of the research customers do is done before they ever reach out to you. And so you can either sit back and hope, right, that they do the things necessary to find you, or you can try to understand that and make sure you're there, right, and you're adding value to them. You need to also define where to create the emotional connection with your customers. The reality is, I think booking a hotel was a great example. I read an article before the pandemic saying, hey, the average person visits like 34 websites before they decide on a vacation. And so you can't be on all 34 websites, right? There's no way you can do that. So where can you be? And then what's the emotional connection? Because decisions are made emotionally, right? As much as we all want to think we're logical, the actual decision, if you look at science around like neuroscience, emotions drive almost all decisions. And then figure out what that connection is and then capture customer feedback in real time. So one thing we don't do a very good job of is asking our customers how we're doing. Maybe we do it at like an annual level, like an annual survey. Maybe we do it here and there, but it's painful to do. And the other thing is we often don't do it during certain portions. So how do you do in this phase? Hey, you went through our marketing campaign. How do you like it? How did it make you feel? And then have a plan for, if you start doing this is more time. So understand that you're going to be investing some time in a customer experience plan. Measure the ROI from that. So if you look at, hey, 2019, we didn't do a customer experience vision or plan. 2021, we did. What's been the incremental improvement from all this work? But what I love most about all of this is that the output is what you've learned in this process of customer experience. You go back and update your marketing plan. So you go back, you take the knowledge you've gained here and you go, yeah, I did my due diligence up front, which normally would have been approved, but now I can go back and make it better. And also, every department involved understands there are clear touch points with the customer that are important and where they can add value. Again, hey, call center, when you're buying product A, there's a lot of fear. I want you, through the customer experience, to make the prospect feel at ease. That becomes a goal. I want you to deliver the feeling of being at ease and that they can get through this, as part of your conversation. You create those that understanding of where customer experience can be contributed to. So that's a lot. That's a big graph. Any thoughts, questions, feedback, comments?
Yeah, this is Gary. So from my standpoint, looking at this, these are a lot of relevant points, and I think as a small business owner, we've always done all of our marketing in-house, and a lot of companies, they have this, it's very easy for people to take our money. We have a pretty significant marketing budget. We didn't spend any of it during the pandemic. And so how do you quantify the return on investment and outsourcing a lot of these things that you're discussing, on whether you can help provide small businesses, I'm in the restaurant space, a return on investment like that? I think that's the thing for me is when do you ask for help, and how do you determine the amount of money that it's going to cost? I mean, these are things that as a business I've always struggled with. I still struggle with, do I do it in-house? Do I have somebody else do this? And I don't. It's always something. For 15 years I've been doing this, that I've struggled with.
How do you do it? How do you do it now? How do you make that decision to go in-house or outside?
Well, I mean, I look at our sales growth. I mean, our business during the pandemic is better than it's ever been. Our locations are over capacity. But we also have a massive customer database of 190,000 people that visited our stores, both email and text messaging, and we have our own in-house platforms to do that. And so for us, the wheel has always been, if it ain't broke, like don't fix it type of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm worried about what we're missing. And sometimes in the past where there was one year we spent a lot of money this was 10 years ago, we spent a lot of money and we learned who our customer was. And it cost us $70,000 to get there. And I was like, well, you could look that up on Facebook and Google now. And so I don't know. I mean, the only thing this is something that I'll just tell you out of transparency that I've struggled with for a long time. And it's I guess for me, I need some help for somebody to convince me to like push it over the edge on when as a company we should let that go.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really good context, you know, and having been on the client side, you know, even though hotels and casinos have very big budgets, you know, marketing doesn't get a huge percentage. There's a lot of cost to run a resort, right? It was always limited budgets, and you had to be very smart in what you outsource, what you did internally. This process can be all internal, right? I mean, this process, and really, even if there are people to help you, right, agencies, et cetera, it should be all driven internal, right? This is the idea of customer experience planning. It doesn't have to be an investment like strategic planning, right? Like there's a lot of great strategic planning companies out there. We work with some of them, and they do an amazing job, and they have their point to come in, you know, help you get your 3-year vision, help you figure out, you know, maybe it's a big shift in product or something, right? This doesn't have to be that degree of investment. Really, though, it's about this idea of bringing everybody together and having a vision for your customer, right? And so the vision could be a 3-page statement, you know, or, you know, 3 pages that go through this. It doesn't have to be such a robust process. But that said, for me, both on the client side and agency side, you know, once you have these plans, right, these individual plans, you've had this vision is refine the plans, which is the most important purpose of this vision, right, is refine these plans. Then it's time to look and go, do I have the skill set, the bandwidth, the expertise to pull this off, right? And that's the hard conversation, because, and I on the client side, I like to have control of everything, right? So I was very apprehensive to outsource. And then when I went to the agency side, the first thing I realized was, man, I should have outsourced a lot of this, because you can't get the scale. I mean, first of all, trying to hire the talent, right? When you think of digital marketing and some of these things, and I'm sure PR, Ty and Abby can comment on that as well. If you're a business, it's hard to get the talent to begin with. And then how do you keep them focused on the current trends and learnings and staying, you know, at the front of things? Because even for us as an agency, it's a lot of work just to keep up, right? So
yeah.
The other thing is you can look at your performance and say, am I happy with where I'm at in these areas? Am I growing at the goal rate? And if you haven't, then maybe you have some audits done and analysis done and get some data. But in theory, I mean, this can be something you drive, you know, as a CEO or the owner of a company. This is your vision, right, that you're driving. And you know, if you can do it internally at scale and at cost, you know, at a good cost, do it. If it needs to be outsourced, do it. If it can be a combination, do it, right? That it's finding that right balance in making it work. Cool.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. So I think we said it, but just to reiterate, the whole value of this, I mean, besides creating clarity, which is amazing, right? But it's that you want a better plan, and your plan is no longer the plan one team makes. It's the plan that's been informed by all this hard work you put in together. Let me make this a little bigger to come up with your vision. So it can be a lot of work. It can be daunting. I'm playing with this here. It doesn't need to be. So we wanted to really break this down into 5 steps everybody in this audience can use, right? You guys can take, you can run with, you can put into action. So it's not such an overwhelming concept. You know, step 1 is you got to make the customer experience the goal. And I think, you know, Gary, to your point, this can be you. You know, if it's your baby, if you're, you know, driving this company, it's saying, hey guys, we're changing the way we think. You know, right now, starting today, customer experience becomes a word we use. It becomes something we talk about, and we're going to not only judge you functionally on your areas, you know, labor cost, call center, you know, drop rate, whatever it might be. We're going to start judging you and analyzing you on your contribution to the customer experience. And so that's the first step. And you know, announce it, make it official, build some energy around it, you know, get some rah action. You know, it's not just something that directors and executives need to be involved in. It's this idea. It's a belief really that if you focus on the customer experience and making sure they have an amazing customer experience from start to finish, you're going to win. You may not win tomorrow, right? It may take some time. It's a little bit of a long game, but you'll win. So that's step 1. You know, make it a thing, make it something important. The second is, and that's where it gets a little nerdy. And so, you know, sometimes these are areas to outsource because it can be a little complicated, but you got to know who your customers are, and you got to know how they find you and how they decide to work with you. And when they don't work with you, why you lose them. Like when you don't get a client, why? If they didn't find you, why? You got to start understanding what their journey is. And a lot of times it involves a combination of media they interact with, sometimes online, sometimes in person. Maybe they talk to people. Maybe they go to networking events or exhibitions. Whatever it might be, you've got to understand, and you can't do it for everybody. So pick a handful of key target audiences, right? Target segments, and do the homework to understand what this looks like. And so there's different ways you can do it. One is you can ask them, right? But hesitance on that is people never tell you what they actually do, like the diet comment. You can also watch them. And so you can do that by looking at like Google Trends. You can do that by, there's some tools out there that will tell you the typical buyer's journey for this and that. There's been studies done. These are where a lot of these awesome strategy companies come in. They'll study an industry and go like, here's the buyer's journey for pharmaceutical products, right? And you can go like, okay, here's the base. Let's understand our uniqueness by talking to people. But, talk to them and watch them, document it, and then figure out where you want to own. Pick a point. Here. We're going to own those touch points, and we're going to do an amazing job delivering a customer experience. And, okay, there's a little bias here. I got to admit, guys, chief digital officer, I might have a little bias here, but start with digital. It's amazing. There's all kinds of weird things we see out there. We see a lot of companies that they just wake up one day. I'm not going to say wake up one day. Maybe there's some science behind it, but it's like, hey, digital gets 20% of our budget. And you're like, okay, where did 20% come? I don't know. And okay, they're like, well, it was 18 last year. We raised it. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. Start with digital. I mean, digital, the way we think of digital is it's a great place to capture existing demand. And so the idea, there's no other place I know of where you can market where somebody will actually type that they want to be a customer, right? People go into Google and say like, I want to eat at a restaurant near me, or like, I want product X, or I'm trying to solve product B, right? Like or problem B, they are actually declaring their intent, or they're visiting websites that talk about the best way to do it. They're on Reddit, they're going to other sites. I can't figure this out. And you're like, hey, I can solve that. And also, if you think about 2020, where we don't want to be over the top and yelling at our customers, we want to add value to them. This is how you do it. You identify intent, you focus on them. And then traditional media, radio, TV, print, some of these areas, they can still do a great job of creating demand, right? But if you think about it, if you only have so much money, before you start creating demand, it's going to be much more efficient to capture all the demand that's out there. And so, we've seen people, when you pull the 80-20, digital gets 20, what happens when you've maxed out your digital budget, but you're only reaching a fraction of that audience that is actually stating they want you, they want your product or service? Squeeze that orange, get every ounce of results out of that you can, then create demand if you need to. The big companies can do both, right? Because they have enough budget to capture all the existing demand and then feed the pipeline, right, through traditional. But if you don't, and you need results and you need revenue, you got to lean towards going where the demand, fish where the fish are already at, and then bring more fish in later, so to speak. And I mean, you can see that in the growth of digital, right? Digital has now surpassed globally traditional. And again, traditional is great and has a lot of use in a lot of ways. We do it for a lot of clients. It's very effective, but create more demand with traditional. And then, this is where all that research you did, get the message right and add value. So if you're going to focus on customer experiences, there's two parts, right? One is you got to understand where you want to be, right? I guess there's three parts. You got to understand where you want to be, have the right marketing message in that moment, right? You got to stand out from the crowd, right? So have a great marketing message, have a great tagline, have a great creative, stand out, communicate that, but then think of a way you can add value. And so, there's lots of ways to do that. Business to business is maybe a little easier. A great example would be, I'm trying to think of one. We're working with a client in Las Vegas on negotiation training. That's what they do. They're trying to get the word out. So when somebody starts looking for negotiation training, we're going to have an ad. We're going to say, hey, we're the best. And we're going to bring them to a landing page that says, work with us. But at the end, we might say, hey, also, if you're interested in learning more about negotiation training, we've created this free white paper for you. Or here's a checklist of things you need to work on. Or here's 5 books that our team, loves, right? Whatever it might be. But there's some kind of value exchange that happens as you earn that awareness, as you earn that engagement with your marketing. It's kind of a way of thinking of almost like paying it forward. It's like, hey, you've interrupted them, you've gotten their attention, you've got your message has done its job. You may or may not sell them in the moment, but how are you going to add value? How are you going to pay it forward? And that's where a nice map like this of like, okay, what's the problem they're facing? How can we help them? What's a message? It becomes a different part of your marketing plan, which is, again, what's the value exchange? How are we adding value? And then get customer feedback. And so, I've been guilty of this over the years, and my team is forcing me to get better at it. We do so much analysis, right? Google Analytics, HubSpot, there's all these cool tools. There's media reports. We can give you so many numbers, right? It's like, you had this many users, this many impressions, this many conversions. Here's your conversion rate. Here's your cost per acquisition. Here's your ROI. Like, all that's great, but how do your customers feel? Like, how do they do it? And so there's tons of tools out there where you can send them emails. You can have website, kind of questions that pop up as they're completing certain experiences, filling out a form, etc. You can have this, after a phone call. There's so many ways, but start taking the same level of due diligence that you do towards data, analytics to understand how your customers are, if they're happy or not. And if the more of these like gold stars you get, obviously you know that you're doing your job, but you can't use a general gold star. You need it at different touch points throughout that person's journey. And then you're going to need tools. You can start very basic with Excel, a couple tools here, and you can graduate to more sophisticated tools. And to the question of when to outsource, when to get an agency, when to get help, start with these tools and get the most value you can. If you've seen results plateau, then it's like, okay, let's start getting these better tools. And then do you have the expertise to operate these tools? And that's when you can get more help. But there's no reason, don't start with this. If you start with the expensive tools, you're probably going to be let down and not get the results. Start easy, start with all these tools that'll help you. And you guys will have a copy of this to look at. It'll help you get there. And most importantly, you got to motivate yourself. That's a lot of work, right? So why would you do it? Because man, when it works, it really works. And I want to give you an example here. I don't know how many of you have seen this. How many of you have seen this old? It's a little older. It's maybe 4 years old. How many of you have seen the Your Man Could Smell Like campaign? I'm tempted to play it, but I don't trust technology right now. There'll be a link in the deck provided. It's hilarious. It is so funny. And it's like if you look at the like perfect, I wanted to use a more recent example, but this is like the textbook example of great integrated marketing. So Old Spice, this is like 4 years ago or so, declining sales year over year over year, getting displaced by Axe body wash, like younger kids, becoming irrelevant. They had to do something different. So they knew, what's great is they knew their audience. They had two core audiences. They had dudes, right? They had guys. And then they had people that are going to motivate guys, wives, girlfriends, partners, right? Because guys, let's be real, we don't really like to change. If we have something that works, even if it doesn't work very well, we're not going to change, right? We're predictable. I know I'm being majorly sexist here. But that's what their audience was. And so they also knew they had an angle, which was humor, right? How do you get through to men? Humor, at least most of us, right? So they leveraged these two things and came up with a hilarious campaign. This guy's voice actually sounds like the guy in Tower of Terror at Disneyland, Dave. I was thinking about that. But hilarious, video. And they had a plan. They had a plan to understand touch points people are at and really get in front of them. So the plan was, launch this on TV. And so they spent a lot of money. They launched the ad on Super Bowl. Okay, you're going to get a lot of visibility there. So there's your initial bang. They expanded with YouTube. And they did this in a really great way. They had some variations of this video. And actually, they're one of the, it still may be the biggest viral video on YouTube. It may have been surpassed recently. I'll show you a little graph on that. But then what was even better is they knew their customers were on social media, and they extended that message with social media. So what they did here's a screenshot. They would ask people to comment and ask questions to a hashtag on social media. And then they would periodically grab the best questions and film a video of this gentleman answering those questions. And they were just over the top. I mean, they were so funny. Like, here's an example. He comes out with like, 1 million gold medals from the Olympics and a chainsaw, right? And answers a question that's absolutely ridiculous from a specific person that was posed on social. And then once that sank, they made a brand transition. This is where it became a new customer experience. They changed the product. Now they're rolling out products called Bulk Up. They changed their entire product naming convention, right? They have funny names, different products. they changed their in-store displays, right? So you go in the displays now, it's no longer like your grandparents, Old Spice. It's now hilarious, right? And over the top machismo. And their customer service even changed. You call their customer service, they have a different swagger. You go to their website, there's a different tone. They're using different language. Their blog, they renamed to like the Man Zone or something, or the Man Blog. It's completely changed the way that people interact with this brand from where it was. And it all started with this idea of, this marketing campaign to get a new message in front of somebody and to add value. Now, this is obviously pre-COVID. So there's another area of value exchange. So if we were to do it now, maybe it's some free samples, or maybe they give back a percentage, of the profits somewhere. There's a little, pay it forward that would need to happen with this, right? And what people are looking for today. But man, it was just a great use of integration and making sure the experience from the second you see the TV ad to when you buy the product is consistent. And the results are amazing, right? So first 24 hours, they had 6 million video views. And this, it's absolutely, and you can see this is a little bit older, but more than Obama's victory speech, more than the famous shoe dodge, Susan Boyle. These are some of the more famous. I'm sure it's a little different now, but and then at 3 months, sales for this company that had been down year over year, sales were up 55% at 3 months, 107% at 4 months. Sales are still growing. During this campaign, which was about 8 months, they earned 1.2 billion media impressions and had 100 million YouTube views. So, if it works, it works. All that homework you do, all the hard work, it's a pain. It'd be much easier to go get a pint somewhere when the bar's open fully. But this is how you get these results. And, in closing, I've been there, I can definitely relate. This is how it feels, right? Especially when you got a million other things to do. So just take one step, take the first step. So, get this deck, pull a meeting with some of your team and just say, hey, let's start focusing on the vision we want for the customer experience from start to finish and build everything around that. And then when that's done, take the next step. So take these one step at a time, and before you know it, you'll be halfway up this thing, and just don't look back. That's scary, but keep taking steps. So with that, that's it.
Chad, when I was getting my MBA in 1986, we did a case study on Old Spice. And what was interesting is the professor gets up there and says, we're going to talk about Old Spice, and the classroom, dead silence, nobody knew what it was anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
I would never have used the Old Spice, right? I would have just walked right by it, right, and took something else. So,
yeah.
Hi, Jackie.
So, Chad, since you've worked on both sides, you've been on the agency side and on the client side, and I've been a big fan of integration as long as I've known about it. What are some best practices for the agency to be integrated in so you actually have input on all these other departments, which are technically not your business?
No, so at the agency side, right, I think the enemy, we have one more enemy in addition to silos, and that's time, right, at the agency side, because every one of our clients' timelines becomes our timeline. And I think the number one hurdle for us has been, and we're getting better and better over time, convincing people doing the work up front will save them time on the back end, right? So that's been the hardest thing of saying like, hey, it may be a couple meetings up front. You may have to do some more homework. Let's put together an integrated marketing document. And Monica on our team, I think she's watching, has done a great job creating a template for that. But doing that first and letting them know that's going to save you hours, hours and hours in the back end and make it worth it. That was the biggest hurdle. I think the other hurdle is some roles are just sexier than others, right? The reality is, you get a digital marketer like myself that gets on a meeting with the client and goes, hey, for every dollar you give us, we make you $10, and then you get another role like, creative that does amazing work that actually is the fuel for what we're able to do on the marketing side, but they can't show that return. So like, how do you make it exciting for them? And so part of it is being humble and knowing that it's all connected, but part of it too is finding ways to celebrate some of the areas that don't get all the, aren't as sexy, right, in the agency. So probably those two things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Apparently you have answered every, kind of like Johnny Carson, Karnak the Magnificent, that you've answered every question there could possibly be.
Maybe, or maybe.
Hey, this is Peter Fishburne. your example of Old Spice is really good, but that's a larger company than many companies in Reno. So and I don't know if you know or not, but I do promotional items. So I'm always trying to work with an agency to say, hey, can a promotional item help benefit what you're trying to do? But my question though really is, because we're smaller, are there examples of where a company that you may know that has been successful in pulling something like this off?
Yeah, it's harder with small companies because they don't publish case studies as often, right? I mean, I can talk to you about some clients we've seen, in the past and currently, and I think a great one is the Row, and I don't even know if they're on the call. Can't give it a ton of detail, but the idea of the Row, we did a summer campaign that was all about, taking a Reno road trip, right? And the whole idea there was understanding where our customers were at. So the quarantine is kind of there, and they can't travel as much. Maybe they're pent up. They've been under a lot of anxiety. Reno, as far as COVID, was in pretty good shape at that time. It's a quick drive, so let's come up with a great message, right, to get people to come out. And that was this road trip idea. And then it was really like, does it become a downtown road trip, or is it a Reno road trip? And it's like, what, they're going to get more value by taking a trip, not just to those properties, right, but to Reno as a whole. And so that's where, then from a naming standpoint, it became Reno road trip, not, El Dorado road trip or Row road trip, the Row trip, right, which was maybe an option. So then you have artwork that promotes, Tahoe, the nice drive with the family. And so the value add then became, how do we make the experience of actually getting from point A to B, valuable? Great. Okay. That part's done. Then when you get into the property, how do we make sure, you're aware of the safety precautions, and things so you got to get the check-in experience has to be right. You have to live up to what you're saying you're doing, right? So we found very quickly that if we were to put a photo up without somebody social distanced or with a mask, it was going to come back right away. And beyond that, then the posts we do on social and the feedback we got from social, we have to take very seriously, right? So once that campaign got rolling, it was like a 4-month campaign. We were monitoring social comments like crazy. And if we're posting like, it's going to be a great stay, you're going to love it, we've got your room safe waiting for you, and somebody's like, hey, it's smoky here, and there's tons of traffic, like we're not living up to that experience. So we've got to be aware of that and change our messaging. So it's a little vaguer of an example, but it can be like, Old Spice was great because it's a product, right? But sometimes when it's a service, it really comes down to what's that feeling or what's that experience. And it can start with as simple as like, are we consistent at every touch point? Because so many clients and people we worked with, even between marketing channels, you see a TV ad, it gives you one kind of view of the company.
This year, we are all students. At Verizon, we're enabling education however possible, preparing teachers and parents, and providing tech solutions to schools nationwide. It's citizen.
Oops, thank you. So yeah, I mean, the first step is always, even before product, would be make sure your messaging is consistent, right? So your PR is consistent with your traditional, is consistent with your social, and then you start pulling product and customer service into it for sure. Yeah. Cool.
I have a question. How do you use the data from Google Analytics? Like what, we see a lot of data on that, demographic data, 25% are from California. So like, what do you do with that data?
Yeah. So, Google Analytics is so great, right? So the first thing, I love to do with Google Analytics is look at what people are clicking through on the site. Like, where do they land? What's the landing page? What do they go to next? What do they go to next? What do they go to next? What's the conversion rate? And then, so you start to see really cool things there, right? You start to see like, oh, wow, my warranty information is like super important because everybody's going there, but it's hard to find. Let's make it easier to find. Or the thing that always freaks me out is I go to Google Analytics and I go, how many people leave my website in under 10 seconds? And it's like 60%. And then you fall down. You're like, oh. So you start to see, it's so interesting because like you walk in 7-Eleven. I think I've said this for a lot of years. Dave's heard this before, but you walk in 7-Eleven and they have the most addicting chips always by the cash register, Takis, right? Or whatever the flavor of the month is. And they do that for a reason. They do that because it sells. And you go to Rayleigh's, like I have a Rayleigh's by my house, things are so strategically placed there, right? If you go to any retail space, that's how they are, but websites aren't viewed like that enough. And so it's haphazard the way things are positioned in place. So, for me, I start looking at what's working and what's not in terms of where are people exiting, what are they clicking on, what's my conversion rate, if I lose them, what page do they land on, all those things. And then for demographics, you want to make sure your website demographics match your customer profile, right? So if you're a Reno-based business and, say you're business to consumer, your typical customer is like 25 to 45 and they're women, whatever it might be. When you go look at Google Analytics, same thing with Facebook and social channels, that better be really close. And if it's not close, you got one of two things. Either you don't know your customer well enough, and so you need to look at that, or you're not getting the right traffic. And so, so many people I've seen in Reno, they get a lot of traffic from outside of Nevada. And you're like, well, how many customers do you have from outside of Nevada? They're like, none. Well, that's 60% of your traffic, and your people. So I think that's on the demographic side, the whole hey, let's target people that I'm not a big fan of the interest in Google Analytics because everybody's interested in real estate. We actually did a really funny story. This was actually at NCET like 4 years ago. We did an analysis with a client that was a plastic surgeon that was promoting breast augmentation. And we found that the majority of people interested in breast augmentation were real estate agents or interested in buying real estate. I don't know what that meant, but we were like, okay, you can piece it together. It's all, but did it mean anything? No, probably not. But yeah, they should be, your customer database, your Google Analytics, and your Facebook. They should all have similar demographic profiles with just slight variations.
Hey, Chad, last time I saw you talk, you had an example, and this is with the Google Analytics. You had an example of a customer that was getting great traffic to their website. But what you found out, maybe you can expand on it. What you found out was that they were getting great traffic, but that traffic wasn't buying. And what you found was there was other traffic that they should have been going after. And it was an older demographic that was actually buying their product. And so you used analytics to kind of change the way they were marketing.
Yeah, that happens so much. And I'm looking at Karen, she's in the center now. She knows this from her days. It happens a lot with convention and visitors bureaus, I feel like, in a lot of cities, because there's like an aspirational audience, right? They want to get in front of. So they're like, hey, we know our audience is aging out. Chad, you got 3 kids, you don't travel. John, you're not traveling anymore. We want to go after the millennials, which will soon be the Gen Zers, right? And then millennials will be old school. And so that becomes everything they do, right? So you look at their social posts, it's got a bunch of 25-year-olds, everything becomes this target audience. But then you go back to the analytics and you go, well, the people that are booking your rooms or reserving your city or buying your flights, they're still your core audience. So don't jump the chasm too quick. You better have at least half of your investment on the people that actually buy you. I mean, maybe we all view ourselves as 25, right? I think I do, but if you're going to have one type of imagery and messaging and the people buying are totally different, it's probably not good, right? You're probably alienating a big part of it. I think it was a travel example though. I think it was that where, they wanted to own the millennial market, which is great, but it's still not their customer. That's going to take a decade, or 5 years to make happen, right? That's aspirational.
Hey, Chad, I had a question. So I had enrolled into this this investment program group, and when they were talking about like their marketing and how they had a landing page, and when they go to the landing, like when people go to the landing page, they like a color. They had this button, and it was they changed the color. It was a color that people really didn't like, but as soon as they changed the color to the button, everyone started, clicking the button to register for the site. So kind of going back to the Google Analytics, how much does color play into, marketing?
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, so there's a cool tool Google has. It's free. It works with analytics. It's called Google Optimize. And there's another more expensive one called Optimizely, which does it, but it's basically, they do A/B testing, right? So, and you can do more than that, but you have version A of the website, you have version B of the website, and you see which one performs better. And you only change one variable. It's so scientific, but you go in there and you're like, okay, here's my website. I'm going to make the button blue, right? And then you run an experiment, and half the audience gets blue, half gets the original color, and then you see if it wins and by what percentage. And I've never been lucky enough to like just call something really well to where like a color change made it. But if you start doing that every month, if you're like, hey, every month we're going to do a test. Because same thing you do in a retail store, right? You'd move stuff around. You say, I'm going to put like the Slurpees up front, or I'm going to, you know, same kind of thing. You go, I'm going to do a test. I'm going to do a different call to action. I'm going to do a different button color. I'm going to word it differently. I'm going to move the form. And if you do that consistently over time, you see really good results. You know, we've had a client in the university space that when we first started working with them, their conversion rate was 1.7% on the site, and it got a lot of traffic. So meaning 1.7% of the people became a student or signed up to become a student. After 3 years of doing this consistently, it was over 5%. And so that's just tiny win, tiny win, tiny win. And Google, if you ever get bored, Google talked about this. They did an experiment called 50 Shades of Blue. It was kind of making fun of 50 Shades of Gray, but they tested 50 different variants of that blue color to see which one people click on most. And they were so nuanced, but that's actually what's happening right now. So I don't know if any of you have watched that Netflix show, The Social Dilemma. Talk about if you ever want to be I mean, I'm in the industry, it blew my mind, but if you ever want to walk out just scratching your head, it's about basically how all these algorithms in social media convince us to spend more time on there to sell more advertising space, but the side effect is like social unrest, like all this stuff. But if you get in the habit of testing things, you know, it's happening all the time. Amazon, any page you see on Amazon has 11 versions of that page, at least. That's the way to go. You know, Obama was a famous case study. He had, when he was raising funds, he had, I think it was like 7 different images, 5 different headlines, a bunch of different color buttons, and then some different call to actions. And they would mix and match to people in different combinations. And they found the combination that got the most donations. So
well, how long do you do the changes and test it for before you make a decision of which working?
Yeah, the good news is these systems are so smart now. They have stats engines built in that tell you when you can believe it. And so, you know, like for me, I don't want to relive college math at all, right? I'm sure you guys don't either. You know, you load it in, you put what your goal is, and then it'll like send you an email and say, hey, this one's reached statistical significance. And, you know, some of these changes, the nice thing about conversion improvement is everything else stays the same. You're already spending money on marketing. You already have your site hosted. All you're doing is bringing more money to the bottom line with more conversions. So I think the e-commerce sites are big ones for it if you're selling anything. And then lead generation sites. You know, if you have a site that people fill out a form, you know, or call you to become a lead, if you can increase that conversion rate, that's just all, you know, money to the bottom line. And yeah, I mean, testing is the only way, because we're not our customers, right? We try to be. You know, we come up with a hypothesis, but we have to test it, and they'll tell us if it works or not. But no specific color. I guess going back to that, no specific color, but I have seen color make a difference for sure.
Have you ever used that to see, say, when you add accessibility to a website? Have you ever used that type of thing to sort of see, you know, what changes you're getting out of really just meeting accessibility standards and things like that?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at Peter's cute kids or grandkids right there. Yeah, I think we have done it. We've done it differently though. With accessibility, it's so important. We've tested to make sure we don't break conversion rate, right? So sometimes you have to do things, right? You have to, Randy wants to add a video to the homepage, right? They're like, hey, forget this hero image. I want a really big video. And you're like, oh, that's going to slow down the site. Or, you know, you're like, hey, I got to add some accessibility components because there's a legal requirement. And so a lot of times when you do that, you can test it first and say, like, what's the impact going to be on sales or conversions? And then in that case, you're not looking for an improvement. You're just looking not to, you know, hurt anything. And so that's how I've done it with that. Most of the time, accessibility, though, we just do it because the risk is just so. Example is we work with a restaurant group that's got 21 restaurants across the West Coast, and their menus have to be regular web pages because some restaurants in California have gotten in trouble for using PDFs as menus because a reader can't interpret a PDF the same way they can a website. I don't know if that's better or not, but I do know the lawsuit is important enough that we can't even mess with it, right? So in those cases, you just got to do.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
Well, Chad, you have set a record for the greatest number of questions, seriously, in any of our webinars. So nicely done.
Well, I appreciate.
Hey, can I ask one more?
Certainly.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Grace Nichols. I liked your earlier comment about putting the customer experience at the center. And I'm on the board of a big service organization that has Committee A, and Committee B, and Committee C, and membership is only one committee. So people treat us like sales is its own silo. And now you made me want to go back to the board and go, it's supposed to be the center. All silos are supposed to point towards membership. But I know that that's not going to be a popular thought pattern. You got any comments or advice?
Yeah, so it all does point to membership, but I think sometimes the angle is sometimes you got to play the game a little bit, right? So the angle is not always like it all points to membership. It's hey, we're all important. How can we make the member experience better from start to finish? So from the acquisition of a member, right, to also how it feels when they're in the facility or however they're interacting with you, to how it is when they refer you to somebody else or donate, just each of the touch points of a member. Let's bring that all to surface and see how we're doing from a customer experience standpoint. And so what happens is that customer experience is what pulls you together, right? It's going to be really hard, I think, I'm just imagining me doing that and going like, everything's marketing. And they're going to go, you're full of shit, right? So what you're going to say is like, hey, we're all equally invested in this other thing. This other thing is called the customer experience. And let's make sure we're all aligned on what that looks like, what it should be, how well we're doing. And once that's the case, we'll update our marketing plan or our membership plan or whatever to fulfill it. And then we challenge you other departments to update your operating procedures to deliver that new customer experience vision we came up with.
Chad, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I literally learned so much today.
My pleasure, guys. Hopefully we get to do it again. Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.